What if the very first act of American history was not a success story, but a total, inexplicable vanish? A blank page where the founding narrative should have begun. Forget Plymouth Rock, forget Jamestown. Before the Pilgrims, before Pocahontas and John Smith, a small band of hopeful English settlers, men, women, and children, arrived on a sandy spit of land in 1587, ready to plant the seed of a new nation. They were meant to be the start of everything. Instead, they became the greatest, most haunting mystery in American history, the lost colony of Roanoke. This is the true story of their attempt, their fragile hope, and the chilling silence they left behind. A silence that still echoes across the Carolina coast. It is a tale of ambition, incompetence, war, and the devastating power of the North American wilderness, interwoven with the desperate fates of 115 souls. Part 1. The Dream and the Dangerous Shores, 1584 to 1587. The vision of a new world and the precedent of failure. The 16th century was an age of colossal ambition, and no man harbored a grander vision for England's future than Sir Walter Raleigh. A favorite of Queen Elizabeth I, Raleigh saw North America not just as a land for plunder, but as a place for a permanent English presence, a base from which to challenge Spanish dominance and secure a future for English Protestantism. His grand project was to establish the city of Raleigh, a metropolitan beacon in the New World, intended as a jewel in the crown of his patron queen, whom he often referred to as the Virgin Queen, inspiring the name Virginia for the entire territory. The first reconnaissance mission, dispatched in 1584, returned with glowing, even exaggerated reports. Captains Philip Amadas and Arthur Barlow described a veritable paradise, a land of gentle people and lush resources. The soil is the most plentiful, sweet, fruitful, and wholesome of all the world, Barlow wrote, painting a picture that captivated London society and encouraged the most dangerous form of optimism. They brought back two local Algonquin men, Montejo and Juan Chis, who were paraded in London, their accounts further fueling the English imagination while inadvertently misrepresenting the complex politics of the region. The first attempt at settlement, led by the military veteran Ralph Lane, landed in 1585. It was strategically and culturally a failure. Established more as a military outpost than a self-sustaining community, the 108 men quickly alienated the local Algonquin tribes, who had initially offered generous hospitality. Plagued by poor planning, an over-reliance on indigenous goodwill for food, and a complete lack of understanding of the local climate and agricultural cycles, the military men devolved into hostile, fearful occupiers. They were scientists and soldiers, ill-suited for farming and diplomacy. The situation deteriorated rapidly. The local chief, Pimisapan, also known as Wingina, whose people had tired of the colonists' incessant demands for food, began to rally neighboring tribes against the intruders. Before Pimisapan could act, Lane's men preemptively attacked. They lured the chief into a parley and savagely murdered him in June 1586, beheading him and driving the English deeper into indigenous hostility. When Sir Francis Drake arrived unexpectedly a few weeks later, Lane's men abandoned the fort entirely, demoralized and terrified, taking a ride back to England. The first attempt had ended in blood and retreat, leaving only a small, doomed detachment of 15 men to guard the empty fort, a tragic sacrifice Raleigh hoped would keep his claim valid. The civilians, the genesis of the lost colony. Raleigh, chastened but undeterred by Lane's disaster, learned a critical lesson. A military outpost could not be self-sustaining. His second venture in 1587 would be different. This was to be a true colony, a mixed group of 117 settlers, 90 men, 17 women, and 9 children, selected primarily for their skills as artisans, farmers, and family heads. They were led by the esteemed gentleman and famed artist, John White. He was the right man for the job, not a soldier, but a governor and an administrator. He had previously documented the indigenous people and the landscape in his exquisite watercolors, now considered some of the most important visual records of early North America. He sought not to dominate, but to settle. Crucially, among the colonists were his daughter Eleanor Dare and his husband Ananias Dare, making White's stake in the colony deeply personal. Raleigh's instructions were unequivocally clear. The settlers were to establish the new city of Raleigh much further north on the shores of the Chesapeake Bay. This location was known to have safer harbors and more fertile land, and was far removed from the hostile tribes antagonized by Ralph Lane. The treachery and the turnaround. The 1587 voyage was doomed by the self-serving actions of the chief navigator, Simon Fernandez. Fernandez, a Portuguese privateer with a reputation for ruthlessness, was a hired pilot, not a co-leader, but he commanded the ships. His interest lay solely in cruising the Caribbean for lucrative Spanish prizes, not the slow, tedious work of transatlantic colonization. When the ships reached the Outer Banks in July 1587, Fernandez refused to take the colonists any further north to the intended Chesapeake site. He claimed the lateness of the season and his own impatience, but historians believe his true motive was to release the ships to begin privateering operations as quickly as possible. He forced the settlers to disembark on Roanoke Island, the very site of the previous failed and blood-soaked venture. It was a devastating betrayal. John White and his people found the small detachment of 15 men left in 1586 had vanished. Only scattered bones remained of one man. The fort was a ruin. The local indigenous tribes, already hostile following Pemisipan's murder, were now even more wary. The season for planting staple crops was nearly over. The settlers had been dumped in a danger zone with inadequate supplies and a short window to prepare for the harsh winter. Despite the grim prospects, hope flickered briefly. On August 18, 1587, Eleanor Dare gave birth to a daughter. They named her Virginia Dare, and she became a symbol, the first English child born in the Americas. To the settlers, she represented the future, the enduring proof that their venture could succeed. But fear quickly superseded hope. Tensions with the nearby tribes were immediate. One colonist, George Hoe, was ambushed and killed by indigenous people while crabbing alone. The settlers, recognizing the immediate peril and the shortage of supplies, demanded that Governor White return to England at once to fetch more men and urgent provisions. White, heartbroken by the thought of leaving his daughter and granddaughter, but understanding the colony's imminent collapse without resupply, reluctantly agreed. Before he left, White established a crucial contingency plan. If the colonists were forced to move, they were to carve the name of their new location on a prominent tree or post. Furthermore, if they were in distress or moved under duress, they were to carve a Maltese cross above the name. He promised to return within 3 months.
The 3-year silence and the Armada, 1587 to 1590. The war that stopped the world. John White left Roanoke Island in late August 1587, sailing back to an England preoccupied with the greatest existential threat of its time. He arrived to find the country gripped by a near hysterical panic, preparing for the inevitable invasion by the formidable Spanish Armada, a massive fleet assembled by King Philip II of Spain to crush Protestant England. Queen Elizabeth I issued a chilling decree. All seaworthy ships capable of fighting or transport, including those provisioned for White's relief mission, were commandeered for the war effort. The fate of the 115 colonists, including White's family, was suddenly dwarfed by the fate of the English nation itself. The war against Spain was a holy crusade, a battle for survival. No ship, no supplies, and no men could be spared for a distant American settlement. White managed to secure passage on 2 small pinnaces in the spring of 1588, bypassing the Queen's command by claiming they were too small for combat. However, the ships were quickly intercepted, defeated, and plundered by Spanish corsairs in the English Channel, forcing them to turn back to England without ever reaching Roanoke. The 3-month window had slammed shut, replaced by a wall of geopolitical conflict. The stunning defeat of the Spanish Armada in August 1588 was a turning point for England, cementing its naval power, but it did not immediately free up shipping. John White was trapped, desperately appealing to Sir Walter Raleigh and anyone who would listen, but always frustrated by the logistics and priorities of wartime bureaucracy. The Crown was more concerned with maintaining dominance and launching its own attacks against Spain than rescuing a small, expensive, and distant colony. 3 long, agonizing years passed, years during which the Roanoke colonists had to fend for themselves, facing the extreme environmental challenges of the Outer Banks, with no word, no reassurance, and no resupply from home. The return to an empty shore. Finally, in March 1590, John White secured passage on a privateering expedition led by Captain Cock, agreeing to make a detour to Roanoke on their return voyage from the West Indies. He brought with him a single English colonist from the 1585 expedition, Thomas Harriot, who had a good relationship with the Algonquian people, hoping this would aid in reconciliation. As White's ship neared the island on August 18th, Virginia Dare's 3rd birthday, he noticed a profound, disquieting stillness. Landing on the shore, they found the houses were no longer standing. The stockade that had surrounded the settlement was intact, but overgrown. There was no smoke, no human sound, no signs of activity. The air was heavy with a ghostly silence. As White and his men approached the palisade, they found the only clue, an inscription carved into a prominent gatepost. CROATOAN. White's heart leaped with paradoxical relief. He quickly searched desperately for the Maltese cross, the signal of distress. He found none. The absence of the cross was an overwhelming sign that his family had not been massacred on the island, but had moved in an orderly, planned manner. White's party moved into the main clearing. The settlers had clearly left in an organized fashion. The houses had been deliberately dismantled, not ransacked or burned. Iron bars, chests of goods, and other heavy items that the settlers could not carry had been carefully buried. Then, on a nearby tree, the search party found the second inscription, simpler and more truncated. C-R-O. The implication was clear. The colony had moved to Croatoan Island, an area 50 miles south, the ancestral home of the friendly Croatoan Hatteras indigenous people, led by the chief Manteo, who had been baptized by the English and was an avowed ally. White was ecstatic, believing he knew where his family was. But fate intervened one last cruel time. As the search party frantically uncovered the buried chests, a fierce storm began to rage, quickly morphing into a perilous squall. The captain of the privateer ship, impatient and more concerned with the lucrative cargo he was carrying, refused to delay. The storm worsened, anchors were lost, and a rescue attempt on Croatoan Island was deemed too dangerous. John White never saw his family or any of the colonists again. He was forced to leave the island and return to England, a man whose hope had been cruelly raised and then instantly dashed. He spent the last decade of his life desperately trying to fund another search, writing, "I greatly feared all their safety, the only comfort of my life, the recovery of which had been to me a sufficient reward for all my travails." He died around 1993, the father and grandfather of the lost colony, without ever learning their fate. The 115 settlers had vanished into the New World, leaving behind only one haunting word: Croatoan. The Quest for the Lost and the Jamestown Clues, 1590 to 1610. The Evasion of Sir Walter Raleigh. Despite the overwhelming evidence of the colonists' move, Sir Walter Raleigh's efforts to retrieve them were sporadic. For years, he paid for private searches and relief missions, but his focus was never absolute. Raleigh himself fell in and out of favor with the crown, was imprisoned for marrying without the Queen Elizabeth's permission, and his finances suffered. The search became an intermittent endeavor, complicated by the constant threat of Spanish ships and the high cost of transatlantic voyages. By the time King James I ascended the throne in 1603, Raleigh was accused of treason and spent the next 13 years in the Tower of London. The official search effectively ceased, and the lost colony passed into the realm of myth, a convenient romantic tragedy that obscured the failures of early colonial planning and the political turmoil in England. The intelligence from Powhatan. When the English finally succeeded in establishing their first permanent settlement at Jamestown in 1607, the search for the Roanoke colonists was reignited. Captain John Smith, the determined leader of the Jamestown venture, was instructed by the Virginia Company to ask the local indigenous leaders about the missing English. Smith's primary source of intelligence was the powerful paramount chief Wahunsonacock, better known as Powhatan, the father of Pocahontas. Powhatan commanded a vast confederacy of Algonquian tribes and possessed extensive knowledge of the territories between Roanoke and Jamestown. Powhatan's intelligence, gathered from various sources, provided a chilling and violent account. He claimed that the Roanoke colonists had successfully moved inland, reaching a settlement among a group of Chesapeake Indians further north near the Albemarle Sound, Raleigh's original target. The English were flourishing, and their presence, their metal tools, their weapons, and their potential alliance with the Chesapeake was a profound and growing threat to Powhatan's expanding dominance in the region. According to the Powhatan account, around the time the Jamestown settlers arrived, Powhatan launched a devastating raid on the village of the Chesapeake, specifically targeting the English. He boasted that his warriors had ambushed and murdered almost all of the Roanoke settlers, sparing only a few young men and 4 girls, whom he kept as captives or slaves to grind corn. Powhatan even showed John Smith a few English artifacts, including a sword, to corroborate his claim. This narrative was alarming. In 1609, a document from the Jamestown Council claimed that 5 of the Roanoke colonists were still alive, living among the Notway and Nansemond people. However, logistical difficulties, the constant threat of open war with Powhatan, and the precarious struggle for Jamestown's own survival prevented any sustained rescue or investigative attempt. The Zuniga Map and the Hidden Fort. Further intriguing evidence emerged from Spanish intelligence. A map drawn around 1608 by the English cartographer Francis Nelson and smuggled to the Spanish ambassador Zuniga included notes based on John Smith's intelligence.
This map depicted a cluster of houses and a small fort deep inland, near the confluence of the Roanoke and Chowan rivers, far from the coast. A tantalizing note on the map stated that 4 Englishmen, 2 boys and 1 girl, lived there after escaping the massacre at Roanoke. This piece of evidence strongly suggested the settlers had moved off the vulnerable coast and into the interior, exactly where Raleigh had initially instructed them to go. The combination of Powhatan's claims and the geographical data from the Zuniga map indicated a mass assimilation or dispersal followed by a targeted attack, likely extinguishing the last embers of the lost colony. The trail grew cold.
The Enduring Theories and Modern Archaeology, 1610 to Present.
The disappearance of the Roanoke colony is an intellectual sinkhole, a historical enigma that has spawned centuries of speculation. While the true fate of the 115 settlers will likely never be known with absolute certainty, the following theories are considered the most plausible, each supported by historical logic and, in some cases, modern archaeological and scientific evidence. Theory 1. Assimilation with the CROATOAN or Hatteras people, the strongest case. This remains the most popular and historically compelling theory. The drought evidence. In the 1990s, scientists conducted tree ring analysis of ancient bald cypresses in the region. The findings were devastating. The years 1587 to 1589, when the colonists were on Roanoke, marked the most severe drought in the previous 800 years. This extreme environmental shock would have led to catastrophic crop failure, famine, and resource depletion, making life on the fragile island completely unsustainable. The colonists had to move. The artifacts from Hatteras. Archaeological digs conducted in the modern-day village of Buxton on Hatteras Island, the historical CROATOAN territory, have uncovered significant 16th century English and European artifacts. These include a slate writing tablet, copper pieces used in trade, various metal implements, and most importantly, a gold signet ring that belonged to a member of the Roanoke expedition named Kendall. The nature of these finds, small personal items lost over a sustained period, strongly suggests a prolonged cohabitation and cultural exchange between the two groups. Oral and genetic tradition. Over a century later, explorer John Lawson documented the Hatteras indigenous people, noting that they had visibly lighter skin and claimed several of their ancestors were white people. This genetic and oral tradition provides a powerful suggestion of intermarriage and assimilation. Conclusion. Driven by famine and the severe drought, a large portion of the colonists, including Virginia Dare and the White family, moved south to CROATOAN Island, where they were absorbed into the friendly Hatteras tribe, trading their English identity for survival. They became the first true Americans, blending their cultures and bloodlines. Theory 2. The final massacre, the Powhatan link. This theory incorporates the assimilation and attack narratives, explaining the ultimate failure of the colonists to reappear. The Site X clue, internal move. John White's maps, when digitally enhanced using multispectral imaging in 2012, showed a faint, corrected patch over a location inland marked by a small, nearly invisible star. This Site X is located near the Albemarle Sound, close to the original Chesapeake target and the Roanoke territory. This suggests White was told before he left that the colonists intended to move inland. Archaeological digs at Site X. Subsequent archaeological digs at the Site X location near the confluence of the Roanoke and Roanoke rivers in Bertie County have uncovered 16th century English pottery, such as borderware and lead-glazed wares, and metal artifacts that are consistent with the colonists' departure date. The finds suggest a settlement or long-term trading post, not just a temporary camp. Plausible narrative. The settlers likely moved inland as planned. Their success, however, was perceived as a territorial threat by the powerful Powhatan, who, in his effort to consolidate power, ordered the slaughter of the English settlers around 1607, possibly leaving a few survivors to be absorbed into other Powhatan-aligned groups. Conclusion. The colonists did move inland as planned. Their success, however, was perceived as a territorial threat by the powerful Powhatan, who, in his effort to consolidate power, ordered the slaughter of the English settlers around 1607, possibly leaving a few survivors to be absorbed into other Powhatan-aligned groups. Theory 3. Split and dispersal along the Albemarle Sound.
This theory suggests that the colony broke into smaller, more manageable groups to survive the drought and threat. CROATOAN group moved south and successfully integrated. Roanoke or Albemarle group moved west or north and were later massacred by Powhatan. The small remnants. Small groups of survivors, perhaps the 4 girls and 2 boys mentioned by Smith, were absorbed into the Tuscarora, Lumbee, or other tribes in the interior. This is supported by later historical accounts of Lumbee people in North Carolina who displayed European physical traits, blue eyes, lighter hair, and English surnames like Dare and Menteo, suggesting a very late-stage integration. This dispersal theory explains the lack of a single coherent site and accounts for all the disparate clues, the CROATOAN carving, the inland artifacts, and the Powhatan massacre claims. The legacy of the lost colony. The disappearance of the Roanoke colony is more than just a historical puzzle. It is a foundational, unhealed wound in the American psyche. The phrase, "the lost colony," evokes a profound sense of the unknown, representing the vulnerability of European ambition when confronted by the brutal realities of the New World, the unforgiving climate, the logistical perils of ocean travel, and the complex, powerful, and ultimately unforgiving politics of the indigenous nations. The story is a powerful cultural touchstone, often portrayed in plays, books, and film, serving as America's first enduring ghost story. The colonists' failure taught the English crown a crucial lesson. Any future venture needed massive, sustained financial backing, a dedicated military presence, and a more conciliatory approach to securing food and land. This lesson was partially applied to the later and ultimately successful Jamestown colony. The ultimate and perhaps most beautiful possibility is that the 115 colonists did not die, but rather changed. They abandoned the unsustainable, hostile English identity, chose survival over allegiance, and were assimilated into the thriving indigenous cultures of the Carolina coast. They became, in essence, the first true multicultural Americans, fading into the historical record, but living on in the genetic and oral histories of the Native American tribes they joined. The fate of the 115, especially Virginia Dare, the iconic first American child, remains an open question, an enduring reminder of how thin the line was between success and oblivion in the nascent days of European expansion. Their failure ultimately taught the English what not to do, paving the way for the eventual blood-soaked success of Jamestown. Their story is a warning whispered on the winds of the Outer Banks. The New World consumes those who do not learn its ways. The ghost of Roanoke is the unwritten chapter of the American story, a profound, haunting mystery that ensures the first attempt to build a nation on this continent will forever be remembered as the lost colony.